Hi, today we're looking at the movement of the legs in transitioning from one shape to the other, specifically the whole idea of internal to external rotation, or vice versa, external to internal rotation. And when I'm out there teaching in the world, a comment that I hear a lot is, oh, you should never go from an internal to an external rotation, or vice versa. That you should always come up to neutral and then move into the next rotation. I always find this interesting because my first question is, how do you get on a bicycle? How do you get in and out of your car? How do you get in and out of bed sometimes? If you live somewhere that you need to climb over fences, I live rurally, so I climb over fences quite a lot. I gotta go from an internal to an external, back to an internal rotation just to get over the fence. So it is a natural range of motion, but we need to understand, first of all, why this comment came into play and how to look at what it means in terms of when it is useful to bear in mind. But for the most part, we need to understand the structure of the whole leg into the pelvis to make sure that we can put it into play in a natural range of motion. So the first thing is the whole idea that you would go from, let's say, Ardha Chandrasana into Virabhadrasana 3. So this is where that instruction comes from. So if I'm here and I'm in an external rotation in my Ardha Chandrasana, my hip is drawing in the opposite direction of my leg, so it creates an external rotation. All my weight's on one leg, and now if I want to turn that into a Virabhadrasana, I have to go into an internal rotation. So in other words, turn my pelvis in with all of the weight on my femur bone. Not quite true, because I had my knee bent, and I would always do it with my knee bent anyway, Ardha Chandrasana or Virabhadrasana 3, but most people do it with their legs straight. And I wouldn't even do it with my leg bent either. To take basically all of the body weight on one limb and go from internal to external rotation is not a good idea, right? Just doesn't make sense. It's not something that we practice that often, especially as you get older and you get more wear and tear in the hip socket. It may not feel like there's any discomfort to begin with, but over the long term, that's when we create more unnecessary wear and tear, okay? And we're always looking to avoid that, right? We want to practice until the day we die. So let's avoid unnecessary wear and tear. Now, where I get the question when I'm doing it, which is interesting, is if I'm going from something like horse stance into a high lunge. Now here, there's two things that you have to recognize. First of all, the ankle has a level of mobility, right? It's not like a structure that's like stabilized and locked in, right? My ankle does maneuver. My knee can maneuver around the ankle itself. My knee is a double ball and socket joint, right? So my knee has the ability to rotate. And of course, there's a huge ball and socket joint in the hip socket, right? So all three of these joints, plus the ability to shift more weight into the leg that's going to support as I internally rotate, means there's no pressure. Most of my body weight is now over here, so that I had the freedom, right, to change from one direction to the other. Internally rotating, you can even see the line of my body is more over the supporting leg, and then come up to the high lunge. And because I'm using the articulation of the joints, I'm not putting extra force on any one particular joint. And that's the important thing to remember. If I'm standing with my legs straight, I think I have to move back a little bit. If I'm standing with my legs completely straight and I'm internally and externally turning my legs, that's a little bit more pressure in the hip socket. The minute I bend, I relieve the pressure in the hip socket because I let the weight go through the natural spring loading action, right? Ankles bend, knees bend, pelvis bends, as a shock absorber. Everything becomes a shock absorber together. No one joint isolated is a very good shock absorber, but together they become joints that articulate to take the weight, distribute movement evenly. So when I'm taking this consideration into that movement, makes it much safer than if I come all the way up, straighten everything. Now there's tends to be more compression in the hip socket and then turn, right? That can be a little bit more compressive in there. So hope that clears up that whole internal and external rotation dilemma. And I always recommend, especially if you're with me in person, I'm always recommending if you can get to one of Gary Carter's anatomy courses. He does anatomy for yoga teachers, for gyrotonics, for Pilates. They're all fantastic. They give you the whole in-depth science behind all of this, right? I just translate it into a moving practice. But if you really want to know more about this, don't take my word for it, right? Investigate deeper, look at the science, look at the information that's arising as we discover more and more about the moving body, right? Hope that helps. Take care. See you next time.